We last left Alan sitting at the writer's chair before the typewriter deep in the heart of Cauldron Lake, about to begin the task of writing himself back into the world, a monumental undertaking for sure. The lake had already broken his mind once, and only unflinching focus on the task at hand could prevent any kind of relapse. But in truth, the story of return started before that, for when Alan entered the dark place, he encountered...
Don't mind him, he's Mr. Scott. Your friends will meet him when you're gone.
And so it is time to shine light on what this ominous statement means, as Alan will be spat out of the dark place into the midst of one of his own stories, becoming a character in the Twilight Show-esque Night Springs. It's time for Alan to fight the insidious Mr. Scratch. This is Alan Wake's American Nightmare. We begin focused on not Alan, but Barry. It seems our lovable agent has found new work representing the old gods of Asgard, who've come out of retirement with a new album and tour. And given we get a taste of their new music in this game, I'd say it's a hell of a comeback. But Barry is now blacked out in his motel. Time has passed, 2 years in fact, and Alan has not returned yet. And as he sleeps, the TV flickers to life rather ominously, and we see a familiar TV intro. And as the narrator does his work, we see a live-action Alan, now looking rugged, hardened, and rocking a cool shirt, here introduced as the Champion of Light. Armed with his trademark flashlight and gun, he stalks through the blackness, and from its depths emerges... That's right, we're doing the evil twin thing. Mr. Scratch takes a moment to taunt our protagonist before wielding the power of the dark place to swat Alan away like a fly. And so, our game begins. Alan comes to, having been spat out of the dark place onto red, barren rocks. And as we orient ourselves to the surroundings, we see we are no longer in Tom's cabin. Indeed, that is... Neither are we in the warped world of Alan's mind, as we were before. We are somewhere else. Somewhere outside. Has Alan finally returned to the world? Or is he now just another of the bizarre phenomena that exists in that place between here and nowhere, known only as Night Springs? Well, maybe we're getting a little too far ahead of ourselves discussing the how and the why of that yet. For now, the important thing is seeing that the Dark Presence has far from given up on Alan, and that whatever this world is, it isn't shy about entering into it. Alan makes a daring escape to the motel where he meets... Well, hello there. This young lady is Emma Sloan, and she is the first of 3 young ladies we'll be getting acquainted with in this story. This interaction is a little strange. The girl claims to have recently met Alan, but Alan insists that wasn't him, but rather his evil twin, Mr. Scratch. On the other hand, the writer already knows that this young lady has the pages with the information he needs to change reality, and there are a few reasons why this could be, but we'll get to that later. Following the instructions on the page, Alan acquires a collection of fairly unrelated items, though his search is interrupted by...
This isn't good for kicks.
Jesus, that was dark. He then fights his way back up to the mine entrance and the gaping hole that leads into the dark place. And when he recreates the circumstances on the page, we get a real sense of just how powerful the words of our hero really are. The amount of force needed to disrupt the orbit of a meteor like that, and the precision required to have it fly exactly into that satellite at an angle that would cause it to crash right here. Yeah, I'm overthinking it. I'm also very scared of our protagonist right now. But within the pages of his manuscript lies the answer. The Dark Place has trained him how to mold reality, nudge it just right, so that if he recreates the same situation, then what he imagines will come true. Returning to the motel, Alan has to save Emma from an attack by the Taken. She then goes on to give our hero information to help him find Mr. Scratch, which sends Alan to a nearby diner, but not before he tries, and seemingly fails, to get her to stay put in the light, rather than trying to get home with the Taken about. Once at the diner, he battles a poltergeist, discovers what seems to be the scene of a very violent encounter, and finds a key to a motel room. But as he returns...
Emma Sloan was a believer in a great many things, most of which were entirely fallacious. Emma Sloan, an innocent victim of his dark half. More collateral damage in the ongoing war.
This section ends with Alan finding the dead body of a scientist in a motel room. Someone who in life worked at the nearby observatory, a place that will become Alan's next port of call as things only get weirder from here. The Taken have already made it to the observatory, and the sole resident is not exactly welcoming to Alan and makes several strong accusations of him. It takes a little work to convince the person on the other end of the comlink that they had in fact met his evil twin, but after a bit of work the doors opened and... hello there. It seems our astronomer here was attending a very important party, and got dragged away at the last minute to deal with some kind of strange signal being detected from deep space. And while she'd love to be getting a clear idea of what it is, the place has been sabotaged by Mr. Scratch and his Taken. So it's up to Alan to clean house and get the place running. The signal is clearly words he himself has written, and seems to be describing the method by which Mr. Scratch can be defeated. Unfortunately, the information is incomplete, but with no other course to follow, Alan heads for the nearby drive-in movie theater, which is where his manuscript tells him he can confront Mr. Scratch. Once we arrive at this third hub, we meet...
Oh, it's you. That's fantastic.
Are you okay?
Go away. No, I want you. But you'll get angry if you're here.
I'm sensing a pattern here. Alan has to restore the power, set the conditions laid down by the signal, and discover that it's not enough. We see a live-action Alan, now looking rugged, hardened, and rocking a cool shirt, here introduced as the Champion of Light. Armed with his trademark flashlight and gun, he stalks through the blackness, and from its depths emerges... That's right, we're doing the evil twin thing. Mr. Scratch takes a moment to taunt our protagonist, before wielding the power of the Dark Place to swat Alan away like a fly. Doesn't it seem like we've been here already? That's right, we're doing the evil twin thing, and the time loop thing. But the twist here is...
Wow, it is you. I guess all of it really happened.
You remember me?
Kind of.
They remember, and they start to take care of things ready for when Alan arrives, cutting out sections of the loop. On the second round, Emma has already picked up 2 of the 3 items Alan needs. She's also much more forthcoming about her earlier interactions with Mr. Scratch, and even listens to Alan about staying in the light instead of trying to go home. It doesn't help, unfortunately.
Stay away! No! This wasn't supposed to happen again!
The memory of her own fate haunts Emma Sloan and fills her with dread. This time, she does as she's told. It's not enough to save her.
Things are also different at the observatory, and the conversations there get quite...
You're essentially saying you're controlling my actions. Leaving aside the rational arguments against this, what gives you the right?
Well, it's more like having a destiny. A path you're on. You're not aware of it, but there it is. If somebody changes it, what difference does it make? It's what every writer does. If you write something that affects one of the characters, they don't really know about that.
I'm not a character. Are you saying that it's all right to take advantage of someone if they aren't aware of it?
Stimulating. Alan is able to secure more of the signal this time, but it's still incomplete. So once again he arrives at the drive-in ill-equipped to escape his trap. That being said, it seems Mr. Scratch is unaware that the other flies caught in his web are aware that they are trapped in a loop, though he does take this opportunity to sick some new enemy types on the writer. Even so, it still isn't enough, and Alan is catapulted back to the start of the loop one last time. He emerges from the darkness to find everything he needs to bring down the satellite already in place and ready to go. This time, he is able to save Emma by defeating the Taken who were attacking the generator for the motel lights, and he heads with all haste to the observatory to finally gain access to the completed signal and learn everything he needs to set up to escape the trap. But will it be enough? Mr. Scratch is certainly a powerful enemy, and he seems so confident in the web he has spun. Will Alan's words really be enough to escape this place? The writer heads to the drive-in movie theater one last time for a climactic standoff with his nemesis, that he might put an end to his tyranny and the threat he represents to all that he loves. Night Springs is the evolution of what started in Max Payne 2 with Address Unknown, and is going to become something else entirely by the time we get to Quantum Break and Control. Remedy throws these little TV shows into all their games as both world building, but also as a reflection of the protagonist's situation. Much of Address Unknown was representative of Max Payne's own trauma, and now we have Night Springs. In the original game, we can stumble onto several episodes of this bizarre hybrid of Twin Peaks and the Twilight Zone. Set in a place where it seems everyone has a weird story or is hiding a dark secret, they are certainly on the bizarre side, and offer up a good hint as to where things would go for Remedy by the time the studio got to making Control. Alan was also a writer on the show, as Barry points out. It was one of his first professional writing gigs, and he actually started writing a story for the show that was never aired, called The Return. This tells us that clearly not all is as it seems here, and that the game's ending can't really be trusted. What's really weird is that even though we know Night Springs isn't real, it seems to be very closely connected to the real world. On the radio, we can hear Barry and the old gods of Asgard talking, and we know that Alice Wake actually contributed a piece of film to the Night Springs Art Festival. Indeed, it's one of the final pieces of the puzzle to escaping the time loop. At one stage, we even encounter a character who recently met Alice, and Alan gets to ask about her. But how can this be the same person we rescued from Cauldron Lake? Are Alan's words so powerful now that he can rewrite the very fabric of existence, merging realities together? Well, the manuscript pages have us covered again. Mr. Scratch can return to the real world effortlessly, but Alan cannot. He said that he's tried many times and that it hasn't worked. Night Springs, however, represents a loophole in the dream logic. It's not really a place, just a backdrop. When a weird story needs to be told, where it happens becomes Night Springs, and to anyone involved in the story, it simply always has been this way. Unable to fight Mr. Scratch in the real world, Alan transforms a place in Arizona, a place close to the borders of reality, into Night Springs for one night, so he can have his showdown with his nemesis. On the other hand, couldn't all this be explained away simply as a non-canonical spin-off, which was more about the devs having fun with the concept and not needing to worry about any baggage from the base game? What is the real story here? It's a pretty intriguing concept overall, especially because the ending implies that Alan has finally reunited with his wife, while anyone who's played Quantum Break or Control probably know this is not the case. What is real? Are we complex beings born of matter forged in stars and perfected in the fires of evolution? Or are we no more than words on a page, subject to the whims of some great unseen writer and their editing team? Mysteries such as these can often be found in Night Springs. I talked in both my RE7 review and my previous Alan Wake video about DLC, but since we're here, it's something I'd like to go through again a little deeper. DLC started life on the PC as what we used to call the expansion pack. These were big box retail products that added some more content to an existing game, from simple Doom map packs to completely new storylines like in Half-Life Opposing Force. What I used to love about these is there was usually something a little extra about them, something beyond the boundaries of the original game. The Tribunal expansion for Morrowind, for example, has a lot more comedy than the base game, and opens up completely new world space beyond the main map, while something like Juggernaut for Quake 2 has a completely unique storyline and world compared to the game it's built in. So there's a tendency to play with themes and concepts rather than simply spitting out more of the same. Given that DLCs can repurpose art assets and even entire sections of the base game, they are definitely cheaper to build, which may mean that devs are a little more willing to gamble on something a little out of the box. Both of the RE7 DLCs play with the base game's mechanics expertly, with Chris's game having much more of an action game feel to it, and the end of Zoe being, well, just so much fun. In the Signal and the Writer DLCs, Remedy didn't play so much with the mechanics as they did the world. Taking place not only within the dark place beneath Cauldron Lake, but also within Alan's broken mind, the artists and level designers were free to dial the weirdness all the way up to 11 to great effect. So even though we're revisiting entire areas from the base game, it doesn't take long for things to get a little extra. I would personally love to see a return to this kind of DLC, as opposed to the much more cynical Day 1 DLC, where something from the base game was clearly carved out to sell off extra, or the much more insidious microtransactions that now dominate the AAA gaming landscape. And so we come to American Nightmare, where things get very extra indeed. First, the setting is neither the dark place or the real world, but in fact the world of the fictional TV show Night Springs. I'll let you take a moment to wrap your head around the fictional writer character of Alan Wake, now existing in the fictional drama from his own fictional New York something something symbolism. So gone are our vast beautiful mountain ranges and gorgeous scenery, and in its place we have basically a desert somewhere in Arizona, and the barren landscapes broken up by a few landmarks that form the central gameplay hubs for the adventure. These are all very well designed, with a great aesthetic bringing it all together. And it has just the right amount of weirdness in it, as though the invisible barriers that stop Alan from going beyond the bounds aren't just gameplay mechanics, but rather more symbolic of this micro-world's edge. A couple of times in conversation the concept of what will happen after Alan leaves is brought up, and while it implies that these people will get back on with their lives after, I'm more inclined to think they'll just stop existing. Kinda like in that one episode of Night Springs. The environments make for a big change of pace as well. Whereas the previous game was oppressively dark and you were surrounded by thick forests that could easily disorient you and hide all manner of dangers, these environments are much more open, and the Milky Way filled night sky makes things seem bright even at night time. This all works to serve the biggest change in this game, that being the action and how much more this game leans into it versus the previous. For a start, there are locked cases all around the maps that can be opened by collecting enough pages of Alan's manuscript to access them. These contain a wide variety of weapons, from powerful handguns to fully automatic machine guns, and some of these are seriously OP. Unlocking these chests gives you extra motivation to go tracking down the pages of Alan's manuscript, beyond of course just listening to Matthew Perretta's elegant vocal cords foreshadow what is soon to come in the game. What's especially nice here is that the pages you do find will carry over to your next playthrough, meaning you'll have access to this much more powerful arsenal much earlier on in a replay, and this is certainly a lot more fun than struggling through with the base weapons. This is all because the game really goes hard on the action, with its much larger enemy groups, it taking less time to burn away their darkness shields, and some new enemy types to keep you guessing. And it's quite clear that my problems with the enemies in the first game weren't just in my head, as Remedy, it seems, actually heard them out loud and addressed them. Scum spawning enemies in behind you has been completely removed, as have the super fast enemies. I wouldn't want these two removed completely from the base game, as its horror themes mean that, used sparingly, they'd be good tools for keeping the player on the back foot, and maybe providing the odd jump scare. But for an action game, these things would absolutely kill the pacing, and be a detriment to the whole experience. The game also includes a horde shooter style arcade mode, which is fine. I don't have a lot to say about it, as I engaged minimally with it. It's a simple, survive the waves of enemies while trying to rack up as big of a score as possible. Very similar to what we get with Mercenaries in Resident Evil, but with a fixed timer. I played a couple of rounds specifically for this video, but I've never engaged with it otherwise. If you're into that sort of thing, I think it'll be fun, but it's not really my thing. Alan's transformation from his base game form to his current one is more than noticeable in both his look and how he handles in-game. His character model and how he interacts with the world and the madness surrounding him has come a long way since his first outing. Alan is very much the action hero in this game. This may speak to the possibility of this all being a dream in Barry's mind, but also his adaptation to his time in the dark place, and the fact he's clearly written himself as the protagonist in the story of the fight with Mr. Scratch and his eventual return to the world. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the opening narrative, where Alan is introduced as the Champion of Light.
The man before you is a champion of light.
I've said before that the defining trait of an action hero in a game is forward momentum. So, does this new iteration of our writer have that? Yeah, I'd say so. Alan now rocks a much stronger unshaven jawline. Gone are the leather-patched tweed jacket and pants, replaced with something more rugged, with the sleeves rolled up for good effect. There's actually a page of writing about this too. Alan is also no longer stressing about everything. He's gotten used to this. This is his life, his world, his fight. When he first encounters a Taken in this game, his reaction is,
It's gonna be like that again, huh?
quite the contrast to this. And when he's talking to the three lovely ladies he encounters throughout this game, he's the one who's calm and in control. Even as they gradually begin to assert more control on the time loop, Alan is the one with the power to change everything. And in other good news, he also doesn't fatigue after sprinting for 3 seconds, so good job on hitting the cardio there, old boy. But a hero is only as good as the villain they fight. And what would be more antithetical to any hero than their evil twin? We know this isn't Remedy's first dabble in this area. And sure, the concept couldn't be more worn out, but just like rescuing the princess in the first game, we see that a tired cliché can still be well written and executed by a writer with enough skill. And the grindhouse B-movie aesthetic here also really plays into this, and implies that Remedy really did know what they were doing when they started making this. Lake was clearly having too much fun when he wrote this guy too, and it would have been so easy to take it a little too far. Scratch, however, isn't some objectively evil force with no motivation at all, but rather, he's everything Alan could be without rules or morality to hold him back. He's all of the writer's worst parts, the things he hates about himself laid bare, dialed up to 11, and let loose on the world. And he's having a great time being him. We engage with Mr. Scratch in somewhat one-sided interactions seen through various TVs scattered throughout the game world, and he is very interested in showing Wake the depth of his perversion. Remember, we've already seen the party boy who lies to his wife and stays out all night, the man with the fragile ego and petty short fuse. So, is it really so hard to think that this creature could have been Alan if things were just a little different? Could we say the same about ourselves? It's this kind of dark exploration that makes Scratch so compelling. Are we really all just one bad day away from being the Joker? Is our morality some kind of objective standard? Something we embrace for the greater good of society? Or something beaten into us and begrudgingly played along with to keep us out of jail? Alan doesn't just have to defeat Mr. Scratch to save Barry and Alice. He has something really terrible planned for them. But to prove that he's so much better than that monster, that he can conquer his own inner demons and transcend the petty selfishness that lives inside us all. Fortunately though, I'd say our upgraded protagonist is well up to the task. With the puzzle complete, Mr. Scratch fades into nothingness, and Alan is reunited with his wife Alice. Or at least, that's how it seems. Maybe this is simple wish fulfillment, or merely the content of the video Alice has cut together for the Night Springs Art Festival. Not that it matters. With the story resolved and the Champion of Light victorious, this very place will soon pass out of existence and become what it was once again before all of this ever started. The planned sequel to Alan Wake has yet to surface. Such is the nature of interactive storytelling, especially in the AAA space, and while it's been over a decade, as we are soon to discover, Alan is far from beyond hope. For now though, we must leave Alan and look to the future, or as it is for us now, the past. Time is relative to the observer after all, and go to the year 2016, and back to the 8th generation of consoles. The year the Doomslayer emerged from his long confinement to rip and tear his way through the hordes of monsters on Mars. At this time, I'd been living in Japan for little over a year, and gaming couldn't have been further from my mind. It is here that two friends will activate the first time machine, an event that will cause a time fracture that, if not stopped, will lead to the very end of time. Next time, we will take the role of Jack Joyce, as we wield the power to manipulate time and compress space, and fight to save all of space-time from a quantum break.